I come from the world of live TV. I've seen some stuff happen on live TV, so I can pretty much take any curveball. Um, and I think I can answer your question. Um, I would encourage anybody who's kind of getting going in any space. Um, just make sure that you really, really have a clear offer for people, because the confused mind does not buy. And I also think it's very hard for the confused mind to sell. So, one ideal client, one offer. Just start there and get really good at selling that one offer to that one person, or be really bad at it and pivot. But it's tough to know what's working if you don't just do one thing.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, a serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Josh Chernikoff. And Josh started out his journey in high school and college, not a bad student, but didn't work overly hard, but made it through nonetheless. Got a master's in broadcast journalism, graduated and was a sports broadcaster for a period of time, went to work for a baseball team. Wasn't the ideal position and moved over to being a student being in the student tutoring business. Started an after school enrichment program and then sold another business and grew that after school business to about 82 schools, and was going to sell the business until COVID hit and put the business deal on pause. And then COO of the business took it over and shifted gears to the lead generation business, which is what he's doing today. So with that much as an introduction, welcome to the podcast, Josh.
Devin, thanks for having me. I appreciate it a ton. You almost, to use a baseball term, batted 1,000 there. The only thing I would change is, and it's pretty relevant, is that I did not work in baseball. I worked in football, and I worked for the Washington Redskins, which became the Washington football team, which is now the Washington Commanders, and hopefully going back to the
And
Washington
before we
Redskins.
dive too deep in that, because I'll give you all the time to correct and make
Yeah.
sure to walk us through the journey. But before we dive into a bit of the middle of the journey, why don't we correct it all and just to rewind and kind of unpack it a bit and start us
Cool.
off a little bit when you're in high school and college, and you said kind of in your own words, not a bad student, but didn't work so hard. So maybe even just rewind and walk us through the full journey.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, those are my words. I think my mom and dad would probably have a different set of words they would use. But yeah, I didn't work incredibly hard in school. I wasn't a bad student. I was actually probably a nice student to have in the classroom. I worked hard in the sense of getting to know my teachers and being a good classmate. But my grades weren't incredibly good. So I think that was actually the beginning of learning how to navigate life. Um, using charisma, getting to know people, networking, and building relationships, which is pretty important in my business today. But went on from high school to American University in Washington, D.C. Had an amazing 4 years. When I say amazing, I mean just had a blast. Didn't learn much. That's not AU's fault, but I had made the best friends that anybody could ask for in the world, and we made the most out of every minute and every night that we could. I went from AU and got my master's at Northwestern University School of Journalism, which was not a party. It was the opposite of a party. Worked really hard there. And basically, I graduated with a master's in broadcast journalism and went straight from Chicago to Harrisonburg, Virginia. Harrisonburg, Virginia was my Bristol, Connecticut. I always wanted to be on TV. I always wanted to make it TSPN. And so my first TV gig was in Harrisonburg, where we covered James Madison sports, Bridgewater College sports, all the way up to the Redskins. And so I was at WHSV TV for a couple years, couple great years. and then essentially got recruited to go work for the Redskins. After a brief stop in Philadelphia, went to go work for the Redskins, and it was a dream come true to get to work for the Redskins, but it was a nightmare of a situation. Um, I'm not sure what you or your viewers know about the Redskins and the toxic situation that was created by the owner, Mr. Snyder, just programmed to call him Mr. Snyder, but it was really bad. And I was at the epicenter of it, and decided that I needed to do something else. And I started a tutoring company in 2008.
I'm just
Only be,
curious. I mean, going from baseball to a tutoring company seems like a bit of a shift. So, in other words, two different skill sets. One is you are, covering sports. You're down in that deep in that world. You're working with, top athletes and those type of things, and going down that, and then the shift to tutoring, younger age kids and how to perform academically seems like a bit of the shift in focus. And so, kind of how did you decide to go from the broadcast sports world over to tutoring?
a bit of a shift is an understatement. There was no connection whatsoever, except that I had a lot of tutors growing up. So I kind of knew what a good tutor could do or could be for somebody. And so I just started working with a couple of students. Their parents wanted them to read and just read more. So I wasn't there to kind of work on reading skills or literacy skills. I was just there to help them read more and get excited about it. And so we did that. So there really is no connection except that, when your back is up against the wall in life, you go either you go down or you try and swing. And so my biggest swing was to just start doing some tutoring, and it worked. The kids were enjoying themselves. The kids were getting better at reading. And then I decided to go all in on the tutoring company around January of '08. And I had left the Redskins. And in May of '08 is when we were featured on the NBC affiliate in Washington, D.C. And that was a game changer for the company, because when you have the credibility of the local news, especially the NBC affiliate in Washington, you're good to go. You're golden. And we got that stamp of approval.
Hmm.
So yeah, to your point, Devin, there's no connection between the NFL and tutoring. But once I got there, I was all in on the tutoring company. And
When you
it
did
grew.
the tutoring company, was that just, hey, one day you quit the job, jumped right into tutoring, and away you went, or did you was it kind of a business on the side, or getting that up and going while you're still working at for in the sports broadcasting, or kind of how did you make that transition or that shift?
Yeah, man, it was classic side hustle right there. It was classic side hustle. I wasn't going to leave the skins until I realized, that I could make a living at this. And then there was still had to be that leap. I mean, you and me and the people that you work with were crazy. Like, we're crazy enough to think that we can start our own businesses and make them work. And so, yeah, I got that entrepreneurial bug. I had it because I had done lawn mowing and smaller businesses, but I went all in and got to a point where, okay, this could be a full-time business, and went for it. And it was.
So you got into that. It is a full time business, and give me an idea, kind of what period of time, or when did you start it, or kind of when did you make that leap over?
It was around January of '08 that, we have officially started. I feel like most of us who have started businesses kind of have this ambiguous time in our lives when the business actually started. So I would say January of '08. Um, Sorry, I've got a truck going by my door right now. But this is live TV, so it's all good. And
All
I've
good.
certainly seen worse than trucks going by. But I started that company, and it started to take off. And interestingly enough, I got connected with somebody in Baltimore who said, "Hey, you're doing in-person tutoring." This was like January of '08. This is May of '08, this was '09. And they said, "Look, here's an idea. Why don't you try doing online tutoring?" And I said, "I friggin' love that idea. How are we going to do it?" And they showed me everything. And so I tried to offer online tutoring to all of our clients. And they said, we love that idea, but no, we're going to do more in-person tutoring. So I was a little too early for online tutoring. Clearly, we needed a pandemic to hit the world for that to come into fruition. But I realized at that point that my company was geographically challenged, that we were going to be stuck in the DC area, which is not a bad place to run a tutoring company. Got a little distracted by a parent who offered me the opportunity to run the after school enrichment program at their school. She was a member of the PTA. And so I ran it, and I would have done it for free. And this mom said, hey, we are going to get you the rooms. We're going to get you the flyers. We're going to get you paid. And I'm thinking, this is everything I feel like we should be doing as a for-profit education company. She said, this is the world of after school enrichment. And I said, well, that seems really unfair. And so I went to a principal I knew who I'm still very close with. And I said, Danny, let me run your after school program. He was at a middle school. And before the words could come out of my mouth, he said, it's all yours. So I happened to have hired somebody named Mandy to run the tutoring company. She eventually got poached by a company called Uber. So she was phenomenal, doing a great job. I started the after school enrichment business. Mandy eventually left, and I said, okay, now it's time to sell that tutoring business. Rolled it up into the after school enrichment business. And from there, it grew to 82 schools in 6 states. We eventually got a letter of intent to get that company acquired. Unfortunately, that letter of intent was rescinded.
So just before we jump into that, real quick, just rewinding. So at that point, were you running both the tutoring program and the enrichment program at the same time and kind of running two businesses in parallel, or did you, shift over to mainly focusing on the enrichment and wound down the tutoring, or kind of how did you balance those two?
I mainly focused on the new business, the enrichment business, because I felt it was more scalable, and it was exciting. And the tutoring business was in very good hands with Mandy. So I was very comfortable, and I saw that there was a connection between, could we eventually place the tutors in our after school program? And so, but I was focused on the new shiny object. We're entrepreneurs. That's what we do, right? Um, so grew that, got the letter of intent, wasn't able to sell it because of the pandemic, eventually sold it to my COO. And my wife said, so what are you going to do for work? It's a very reasonable question. And I said,
Now,
no, I'm going
just
to,
sorry, one other kind of curiosity, just so when you see, hey, shiny new object, I guess a couple questions. So with the tutoring business, is that one where you just simply turned it over, left it, walked away, or did you sell it or keep a portion of the holdings? And then same thing, what kind of motivated the selling of the enrichment program as well? Kind of both of those, kind of how did you extricate yourself from those?
yeah, on the tutoring company, I got approached by a Canadian company that was essentially buying up smaller tutoring companies that were in home, and they were going to layer in their version of tutoring. And they said, we'll keep you around for 6 months. And I don't think they called me once, which was fine. It was their baby. It was their business at that point. On the after school enrichment business, um, just got to a point where I could take a different position with the business and turn it over. I had a mentor of mine who said, there's always another bozo who can do this business better than you. And so I found the bozos. The second bozo who in my life, who bought my enrichment business happens to be a best friend of mine, Michael Fay. And we are in business together. We own a sports franchise that caters to kids. And I'm also one of the largest investors in Flex, the business I sold to him. So it was just time. I feel like 10 years is a really good time to kind of turn it over and take a new role. Um, so that was why it was time.
Gotcha. So now you said, okay, I'm going to, extricate yourself kind of from the business. You're gonna, look to, then on the in after school enrichment business, sounds like you'd been working towards a deal it gotten close, and then kind of COVID hit and put a whole or a pause on that. Was that primarily just because of the uncertainty, or didn't know how education kind of shut down and then went to remote learning and then kind of reopened? Is it just a lot of the uncertainty, or kind of what kind of put the pause on that and then kind of shifted that around?
Yeah, if memory serves me correctly, we thought the world was going to end on March 13th, which was a day I think the NBA shut down. And I had met with the company. We signed a letter of intent on like the 10th of March. We met for lunch in outside of DC on March the 12th. And then I got a call from the company that was putting a deal together on the 13th saying it was on hold and don't expect for now that it will resume anytime soon. So I went into kind of a desperation mode. We tried to move all of our um, enrichment online. So, like if parents were doing, say, karate in person after school, we were going to offer it online. The idea was great, clearly, because OutSchool made billions doing it. Our execution wasn't necessarily what it needed to be. It did help us keep the business afloat till we could get back to in person. But yeah, I mean, in the education space, I I could give you a very long list of companies that I work with who had total shutdowns during COVID and are trying to come back and actually are making it back. And other companies who had spikes during COVID and are struggling right now to come back because people aren't necessarily in the online space as much, especially when it comes to learning, especially when it comes to K-12.
So now makes sense. So now so as you shifted, kind of COVID put a pause on that, almost had the letter of intent, or had that and didn't work out. So you're shifting over, saying, okay, that's not going to work out. And then I think you said it was your COO or CTO that kind
Yep.
of ended up buying out that business and taking it
Yep.
over, and decided to go in a different direction.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I brought Michael in um, when the business actually moved from enrichment and summer camps into an aftercare role. The reason that I brought him in is he had experience in aftercare. Aftercare is a much bigger beast than enrichment. Aftercare requires full-time, part-time employees, licensing. And so honestly, Michael was the best person to take over this business going forward. And we have a great relationship. So he was willing to listen to my thoughts, but just do what was best for my baby, um, and allowed me to really focus on my next business. And I was able to take out all the bumps and the bruises and the little bits of brilliance from the tutoring and the enrichment business and create my third business, which is what I'm living and breathing now.
So now you'd said, and I think you're putting words in your mouth, but I think you said that your wife had kind of asked you, "Hey, what are you gonna do now that you've sold out your business?" And I think if I remember right, you'd kind of shifted over to lead generation and kind of focusing on that a bit now. Again, that seems like a bit of a shift. Maybe less so, because I think every business you're having to figure out how to generate leads, how to bring in new business and new customers, and so there's kind of always that common thread throughout business. But again, it still seems like a bit of a shift. So how did you kind of figure out, after you sold the last business, or the after school enrichment business? How did you figure out kind of what would be that next step?
I mean, it was much less of a shift from the NFL to tutoring. But no, I mean, growing those two businesses, I had literally had the same accountants since I started the tutoring business. So I was never the numbers CFO type. I've always had operations people, whether it was Mandy when it came to the tutoring company, or whether it was Michael when it came to um, Flex. I could fake being a COO to about 5 million, but then people start asking, why'd you make that decision? And they had very valid reasons as to why they were asking me. But when it came to the business development, when it came to the lead generation, that was always built around me, and it was built around my personality and my desire to nurture relationships and my desire never for the hard sell. Um, and so um, I decided to uh, go to some of the companies that I knew from the enrichment space, the karate company, the yoga studio, whoever it was, the coding company. And I said, hey, I can help you get more high quality leads for your education company because I know education and I know how to sell into the space. And I said, but let's go through a few baby steps here. Let me ask you a few questions first. And I asked them questions, let's talk ideal client. Let's look at your credibility. How do you close? Show me how you close. I love closing. Close me. Sell me this pen, type thing. And they couldn't do it. And I said, okay, well, I have a problem with my business model because I can't just bring them high quality leads because they don't even know how to bring them themselves, but I have an opportunity. So I took a step back, got hooked up with a professor, and we wrote the Ed Sales Elevation Experience, which is a course designed specifically to teach people how to sell on repeat in the education space. And a lot of the people we work with happen to be educators, former educators, product people. So the selling portion does not necessarily come naturally. And they're generally hesitant to do it because they don't want to sell whatsoever. But I believe in founder-led sales. And so I encourage them and motivate them and show them the way that they can build a sales system that they're comfortable with, and then they can hire the right person.
So now you said, okay, you go in that direction now. How did you, with that, a bit of the shift to get in direction, not as drastic or as differing as the original, shift to the tutoring and the enrichment program. Now, how did you go about kind of building that out? Was it approaching former contacts or people that you'd already had relationships with and leveraging those and building that as a customer base, or was it hitting it from scratch and the ground up and kind of going out and figuring it out, or kind of how did you go about kind of building up that business?
Um, so first of all, I took a step back and looked at all the things that I did right and wrong in the first two businesses and kind of distilled that into the course. Um, I also certainly leveraged my network that I had in terms of people that I had worked with, and that's always helpful. But what I also did is I went out and talked to people I didn't know a lot. I'm talking hundreds of people in the education space. And I listened to people who didn't know me, but could identify and with my story and recognize my credibility and ask them where they were struggling when it came to lead generation for their education business. And that absolutely helped me understand where the challenges were, where the objections were, where the rejection was going to come from potential clients, because these people had nothing to lose. Like, they're not my friends, they're not my family, they're not my, colleagues. So they gave it to me straight. And so I went out there and did that for about 6 months. And that listening tour helped me build the right business, and a business that people wanted, not necessarily the business that I thought they wanted. That was
Now,
my
maybe
process.
one or follow up to that, which is, in or that definitely it's great to get that, feedback, talk with them on that. And yet on the other hand, a lot of businesses, you're going out and you're wanting that feedback, but you have a hard time getting people to do a 10-second survey in order to say whether or not you provided a good service, let alone sitting down and kind of saying what they don't like or what are some of the drawbacks. So, or how did you go about people you didn't necessarily even know and weren't vested in the outcome or the business? How did you get them to be willing to give you a bit of their time or to give you that feedback in order to decide how to build a business around it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So part of what I did is first I really did some work around my ideal client, and really thought about who I believed wanted to work with me and I could help, whose lives could I transform the most. And that was a little bit of art and science, that was some gut and that was some of my brain. And then I went out and I really worked on, honestly, my own LinkedIn profile. I turned my LinkedIn profile from kind of a resume into a sales funnel so that my LinkedIn profile spoke to those people. You know, for example, like your headline in your LinkedIn. Your headline can be old school, like, you know, entrepreneur, business owner, blah, blah, blah. Or it could be something that sells. My formula is I help who using what method get these results. So that when people go to your LinkedIn profile, they see it's professional and it starts to speak to them. The third thing I did was I did those interviews and I reached out to people over LinkedIn with a really strong message saying, you know, I truly have no sales pitch here. I don't even have a business yet. I'm just want to listen to people in your space about what your biggest challenges are. And then what I'm going to do is share the results with you. And what that might give you is validation that selling in the education space is pretty darn hard. All I need is 10 to 15 minutes of your time. And I would turn off, and I mean turn off, cut the cord, shut it off, the desire to sell. And I would just go listen to people. And so, to your point, I think that people were willing to meet with me because they were my ideal client. And I had really worked on my LinkedIn profile so that they knew that this was valuable time to spend together.
No, makes perfect sense. So you make those shifts, you kind of go in that direction now. Give us an idea, you know, what period of time or when did you start the lead generation business? Kind of when did you go out and do some of the client discovery and go down that route?
It was over the last 3 years. I've basically been splitting some time between Washington, D.C. and here, a small town in Mexico. So that's how I can mark that time in my life. Um, you know, the first year of the business was an absolute flop. Just, you know, I was really trying to craft my offer. So my coach, Tony, would say, it's not a flop. You were figuring things out. You were getting that offer tweaked. It wasn't until a year in that we really began to hone in on who our, you know, what our offer was, you know, how our ideal clients responded to us, what they responded to exactly. And then we began drilling down. And it was about a year and a half ago that we really started getting the traction that we wanted to see. And that takes consistency and that takes clarity. Um, and, you know, we ran our first cohort of the Ed Sales Elevation Experience about a year and a half ago. And there was instant success. When I mean instant, I mean first day. People were walking away saying, wow, I learned something and I feel more confident. And I'm going to use this when I go out and sell in the education space. And from then on, it's certainly been a learning experience and it hasn't been without its challenges, but we have grown every single day since then.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like it's been a great, you know, kind of hit the ground running, so to speak. After, you know, you said the first year was kind of stagnant or didn't work out as well, but kind of once you figured out a bit more of that formula and kind of what the ideal client was looking for and kind of what that would be, was one that made a good shift and a great
Yeah.
transition. So now walk us through kind of where things at today, and now if you're to look kind of at the next 6 to 12 months, where do you see things headed?
Yeah, I'm in a really, you catch me at a really nice time today. Um, if you had asked me, interesting, let's see, 30 days ago, how's the business? Although the business is doing fine, I would have told you, I'm not sure if we're going to survive, which my wife would say, you're crazy, you know, because she lives and breathes this stuff with me. Um, but it was really the first year that I got to run the business and get through all the seasonality. So July was kind of a slower month. I was meeting a lot of people, but they weren't closing. And that began to wear on my confidence. And, you know, we're so tied to our businesses. But I told myself, okay, this is just the low season. It's all good. So I shifted into planning mode, not closing mode. And then we picked up right around August 15th. And so we have 3 ways that we offer the Ed Sales Elevation experience. The result is always the same. We are able to build lead generation machines on repeat for our companies in education that bring in 15 to 20 high quality leads per month. But we deliver it in 3 different ways. We have a cohort where we have 10 companies that meet in each cohort, 2 people each. We have milestone coaching where we work with a company, my team and their team, and then we have the done for you model. And in terms of our cohort, generally we have done them on Tuesday mornings at 10 o'clock Eastern with 10 companies. The next one starts on September 24th. And I'm proud to say that we have completely sold it out. And so we had to open up a Thursday cohort that will open up on September 26th, and we're halfway to selling that one out. So I feel really proud of where the business is, especially when it comes to that cohort model and being able to speak to those clients who are looking for a cohort at that price point. And now it's time for me to level up and be able to talk more to companies who want milestone coaching, which is a totally different offering, a totally different price point. But I have to get comfortable with that. And what it feels like, Devin, it feels like starting over. And starting over feels a little shaky, because we're trying things and it doesn't necessarily lead to a close immediately. So I'm proud where the business is. I'm also anticipating some rough waters in terms of learning more about this offer that we have with our milestone coaching.
Well, makes sense. Sounds like it'll be, again, as with a lot of times, venturing a bit into the unknown, but
Yeah,
also provides a lot of opportunity, a lot of great past yet to come. So it'll definitely be fun to see and watch and see how things play out. So definitely wish the best
totally.
of luck on that.
Thank you.
Well, now as we've kind of reached the present day of the journey, always a great time to transition to the 2 questions I always like to ask towards the end of each episode. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? And what'd you learn from it?
Yeah. This is an interesting one. It's a great question. I've thought a lot about it because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus through my answer. Because as CEOs, as the founders, as the owners, we, you know, it all starts and ends with us. I If I could go back and do things over, which wouldn't necessarily be the thing to do, I would A, not be so obsessed, hopefully, with raising money. And I'd be a lot more obsessed with just getting traction. And raising money at the wrong time in the business. The business was too immature. And frankly, I think I was too. And I chose the wrong business partners at the wrong time. They may have been the right business partners had it been different times, but we were not the right fit. Throw in a pandemic, throw in one really bad, big business decision where we lost a lot of money. And so that made for really tough times.
Hmm.
And I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily fond of the way I acted. I don't know if they would be either. I certainly wish, my business partners well, but I think um, they and I would have done things differently, and certainly would hope to have avoided losing $350,000 and a pandemic in the middle of our partnership. But we made the decision together, and we ended up splitting. So I just encourage people to really think long and hard about before you raise money, make sure you get enough traction and make sure that you can be in it for the long haul, even through a pandemic with your business partners.
Yeah, and I think you hit on it. I mean, I always business partners can be a great foundation for success, and other times they can be a drag on the company. And not always is it even that it's the people that are the business partner themselves are bad. It could be whether or not it's a good mesh between everybody that's in the partnership. It could be whether or not everybody has the right skill set, right expectations, and sometimes it's just, hey, some people just don't make good partners. I'm probably fit into the latter. It's where I found for me personally, I don't like partnerships, not because partners can't add a lot of things, but it's just like I like to make quick decisions. I like to have the ability to be flexible and to not have to, not in a bad way, but have the accountability of having to run ideas by everybody all the time. And while I have people and mentors and people that I have relationships with, so I like to bounce ideas off with, I like to just be able to say, hey, this is something I want to try, and I don't want to have to make a decision by committee. And yet, while that works well for me, it also means I'm not necessarily the perfect partner for other people, just because I like to go in different directions and take a different approach. And so I think when you're looking at your partnerships, kind of as you hit on, there's a number of things that kind of play into that. And you have to weigh what is the right setup for the business and for you personally. So I think that's always an easy area to make a mistake, but oftentimes a great one to learn from.
Yeah, and you you put it really well, and I think both of us are like people. So it's kind of an interesting thing to say, maybe I'm not the best partner. And so I'm with you. Like I love people and I'm an extrovert and love meeting people, but at this point I'm definitely not interested in partners. I mean, I say that now, but I believe that in this moment. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like maybe you just aren't the best partner and that's okay. And so it seems like you have realized that, and so have I, through some tough lessons.
Yep, I think so. So now I am gonna, Eric, throw you just a bit of a curveball in the sense that we've recently with the podcast shifted just a little bit on what our second question is. So you don't have quite as much of a heads up, but hopefully it'll work nonetheless. So the second question that I've updated and shifted to that I like to ask is: so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb that you would give them, or one guiding principle to live by?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I come from the world of live TV. I've seen some stuff happen on live TV, so I can pretty much take any curveball. Um, and I think I can answer your question. Um, I would encourage anybody who's kind of getting going in any space. Um, just make sure that you really, really have a clear offer for people, because the confused mind does not buy. And I also think it's very hard for the confused mind to sell. So, one ideal client, one offer. Just start there and get really good at selling that one offer to that one person, or be really bad at it and pivot. But it's tough to know what's working if you don't just do one thing. And so I always encourage people, again, spend that time, think about the pains and the pleasures of the person you can transform the lives of.
Hmm.
Who can you work with that you can transform their lives, that they're going to say, this is exactly what I was looking for? Whether you walk up to them at a conference or whether you send them a cold email, this is what I need. And then get phenomenal at closing them. It's like, I don't know, I end up using a lot of golf metaphors. Just spend all your time hitting pitching wedges, 100 yards in, 100 yards in, and get phenomenal at that. Then move to your long irons, then move to your driver, then move to putting, you know, but don't try and sell to a bunch of different people and have a bunch of different offers. While it's less sexy, it's a lot more effective.
No, I like it. I think that's definitely makes sense, and it's a great takeaway on a great rule of thumb. So Awesome. Well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, joshchernikoff.com is a great place to go. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm consistently on my LinkedIn posting, talking to people, trying to help them out when it comes to lead generation for their education companies. Granted, um, while I focus on education, I can probably help other people in the space if they want to reach out and look for some quick coaching. So I would say the two best places are find me on LinkedIn, and or joshchernikoff.com. And I'm sure you'll put it in the notes because it's not the easiest last name in the world to spell.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again, Josh, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for
Yeah.
all of you that listeners are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, you can go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. If you make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And if
Mm.
along those lines, you ever need help along your journey with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help.
Hey,
Well,
Devin,
thank you again, Josh.
can
Yep,
I
go ahead.
thank you? I wanted to thank you. I appreciate you, really giving me the opportunity to talk and share, and it feels good. And it's nice to have somebody listen and reflect back, so I just wanted to take a second and thank you for that.
Absolutely. It's been fun to have you on. Been a great conversation. Appreciate you taking the time. So with that, thanks again for coming on the podcast. And I wish you the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.